Dear listeners, it's going to be a week or two before I finish my episode about animus and anima. I need to take a little time away from it to focus on my fiction writing, as I hope to release a novel later this year. In the meantime, I thought I would share a poem I wrote about Persephone and Hades as an example of working with archetypes in a creative way. Later in this series, I plan to do an episode about different activities I have used to connect with archetypal material, and writing poetry is one of these activities. The myth of Persephone and Hades has fascinated me for a long time, and I have retold this ancient story in multiple ways, from various plot lines in the Landers saga and Phoenix Realm books, as well as in my novel Persephone's Tears, a romance in the seventh dimension. This poem appears in print at the end of that novel and takes a different perspective on Persephone and Hades than the prose story I wrote. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the influence of Clarissa Pinkola Estes' audio presentation, The Creative Fire, as an inspiration for me. I highly recommend anyone dealing with a creative block to seek out The Creative Fire. I don't believe it's in print form anywhere, but you may be able to find it through whatever podcast app you prefer. She delves into the myth of Persephone and Hades extensively in The Creative Fire and how studying that myth and its various versions can help artists overcome creative blocks. As always, a link to the script will be in the show notes, and thank you for listening. Now, without further ado, I present Luna Moth, my archetypal narrative poem. Luna Moth. The girl had always assumed she was a butterfly. Like her mother, the other women around her. Her mother had always told her so, had taught her the day paths, the sweet warmth of the flowers with their bright satin petals, how all good things happened in the light. Plants grew under the sun, buds opened at Helios's gentle touch. Children laughed and splashed on hot Mediterranean beaches at noon when there are no shadows. Innocence lives in the light, but dies at night. When the girl asked about the dark, asked about the night shadows they frightened off with fires and torches, her mother brushed her curiosity away, as easily as she flicked away time's dust with a beat of her shining immortal wings. "Go to sleep when it is night," her mother said. "Sleep will banish the night, and you will forget these ugly shadows by the dawn when you wake. Live in the beauty of the day, daughter, and forget the dark." But dreams stalk the girl's sleep. Dreams of obsidian halls swirling with tall shadows. Dreams filled with the muttered chants of the dead, half heard through the veil shrouding worlds. A mighty, slow-flowing river of black water to cross, where the dying shed the dried husks of their mortal lives to rattle in the wind of their last breaths, left their memories as payment to a skull-faced ferryman, whose only comment on these treasures was the quiet slosh of his vessel against the current. The girl's wings glowed a lovely luminescent green in these dreams, a strange beauty unknown to her mother and all others who only went by day. She danced where the river lapped its banks, her wings mirrored in its rippling silken night surface, bobbing like ghost lamps under the water. The river whispered all the stories it knew, stories of those who crossed, life's passions dropped into the inky depths like wishing coins. The girl kept these dreams to herself, knowing her mother would label them nightmares and not understand. As the girl grew into a woman, her wings troubled her. They didn't glisten with all the rainbow colors of her mother's wings. Instead, they remained subdued in the sun, something seemingly not ready, unfledged and still furled tightly, the white green of the first plant shoots in the spring, almost as if she camouflaged her subtle beauty from the harsh light of day. Her wings looked best in the soft shadows, where they glowed and revealed their full spectacle, as luminous as creamy moonlight through a screen of young leaves, night blossoms, though no one dared say it, especially in her mother's hearing. Her mother said not to worry. If the young woman would only dance more in the sunlight, her wings would soon reflect all the bright, happy day hues, like her mother's. Although she heeded her mother's words and flew only during the day, strewing seeds all around as she followed her mother's path, she still speculated about the dark. Her mother, the goddess of all life, refused to tell her of night, of the dark. When she asked, her mother shivered, her wings all a-tremble as they shed pollen shimmering golden in the sun, the sparkle of life magic. Finally her mother admitted, "I didn't tell you when you were younger, but night is when death knocks and demands entrance, We burn the watchfires to keep Death and his shadow hounds at bay, daughter. Death hates all light. Do not ask again. Do not wonder about these terrible secrets, or your wings will never achieve their full colors. Do you wish to remain a moth forever?" But the maiden knew the shadows held more than death. Seeds and children and all young things started in the dark. Even a butterfly existed in her dark chrysalis before unfolding into the light. Many beginnings remain cloaked in midnight mystery. Despite all her obedient flying under the sun and never the moon, the young woman's wings stayed a pale green. Her mother sighed over her and patted her and reassured her. It just took longer for some, her mother said. Just continue to be sweet and merry and always in the light, and stop worrying about the wicked dark of the night. One afternoon the young woman picked flowers in a meadow, other innocents frolicking around her. Soon they tired and lay down in the soft grass, one by one dozing to the drowsy buzz of bees, the golden blanket of sunlight covering them. The last one to drift off, the maiden studied the wings of her companions, all rainbow-hued, all bright under Helios's warmth, glimmering ripples of prismatic color as the slight breeze stirred them. No one else had dull wings like hers. What was wrong with her? She danced in the light as much as the others. Perhaps she was quieter, more introspective. Perhaps she failed at always being sweet and cheerful. Perhaps she had secrets. Those dark dreams she had, those were secrets. She had never shared them with anyone. Maybe she should. Maybe the confession would cure whatever ailed her, would make her like the others at long last. With these carrion foul thoughts picking at her, she fell into a dark place, her sleep heavy as earth heaped upon her body. Buried in night, she found herself unable to see. She crawled blindly forward across the hard, barren floor of hell, the only warmth her blood dripping from scraped knees and hands. Voices called to her from the unknown ahead, voices of the lost, voices of the damned, voices of the lonely and forsaken, voices of the dead, grieving the locked door between them and their mortal lives. Pity welled in the maiden's heart at the cacophony of suffering. She wanted to help them, but doubted herself. How could she help them, an untested maiden who couldn't even maintain the correct mood, who couldn't even earn the proper colors for her wings? Her sorrow for the dead swelled within until she could no longer contain it. Hot tears ran down her face and trickled to the floor, heating the cold stone for the first time in eternity. She woke to her own sobbing, to the frightened faces of her companions. None of them ever cried. They had no need to weep in their perfect daytime world, with their perfect rainbow wings. The young woman, still crying, staggered to her feet and fled into the woods. The others ran after her, but faltered at the edge of the forest. Shadows hung amongst the trees, no clear paths to be discerned. These butterflies feared the dark, knowing underneath they were not made for it. Far off in the dim spaces under the branches and leaves, they saw the maiden's wings glowing as she wandered to and fro, an unearthly luminescence, a witch-light in the dark. This awed them, which terrified them. Nothing in their sun-filled lives had prepared them for such beauty. They didn't understand it, and they turned away from it. They raced for the safety of home and pretended they hadn't seen. When the young woman's mother demanded to know where her daughter had gone, they couldn't tell her. Fear had shackled their tongues. Their surface minds never remembered, but from then onwards their dreams disturbed them, and they wept in their sleep. As for the young woman, she lost herself in the woods. She wandered in wonder amongst the trees, the cool cedar-scented shadows soothing away her tears. Her mother had always warned her that danger lurked in the forest. She supposed her mother was right. Nothing felt known here, nothing felt entirely safe. An edge of mystery tickled down her neck like a blade, and she felt more alive than she ever had. The deeper she went, her safe world disappeared behind her. The trunks and branches leaned together and swallowed her past until all she could see was forest. No butterflies, no sunlight, no mother. Panic took her. We all dread stepping into our truth, especially when the inevitable shoves us there. The maiden screamed for her mother, for her companions. Branches tore at her clothes, then her skin as she tripped and stumbled, desperate for a path, any path, but finding none. No, what she found was herself, when she tumbled to the ground before an enormous chasm rending the earth. Curiosity stilled her alarm as she peered over the edge of her world and into the utter dark of another. At first she could hear nothing but the wind sawing through the pines nearby, a lovely whisper that grew to a wailing lilt, the sad susurration of the trees singing. The more she listened, the more she forgot herself, forgot the overworld around her. Under the singing of the pines, under the very earth itself, she slowly began to detect another sound, so faint at first she thought she imagined it from her dream. The voices of the dead, calling her name, Persephone, they chanted over and over, a rattling dried husk of sound, the breeze through fallow winter fields, carrying the chrysalis of the spring to come, whose seeds lie in the snow and ice, whose seeds lie in the dark, whose seeds lie in death, whose seeds lie in the ashes of the phoenix, patiently waiting for mortal time to catch up, the backwards alchemy of new life. Staring into the featureless dark of the underworld and listening to the dead, all this she suddenly knew, with a crone's wisdom and a maiden's heart, the beautiful paradox of her. A rumble rose up from the chasm, shaking the ground beneath her. She stood, smoothed her wild hair, pulled the thorns from her ripped robes, as if preparing for a guest. 4 black horses pawed up from the darkness, shadows swirling around them. They drew an ebony chariot. Their driver was Death. A gray cloud swathed him in ambiguity, and Persephone could see nothing of his form or countenance until he held out his hand, gloved in night. She laid her palm against his and gazed where she thought to find his face. Far back in the darkness there, 2 distant stars twinkled in his eyes, the ancient eyes of watchful eternity in space. He spoke, his voice echoing up from the deepest hidden caverns of the underworld. Your lost children summon you, Persephone. Do you not hear them? I hear them, Hades. Will you not go to them? I want to, but I don't know how, and I know not what help I can give them. She felt rather than saw him smile. That is no matter. You will understand your mission soon enough. Come, what you need to see can only be seen in the utter darkness. So she climbed into his chariot and went down, down, down through all the secret places and paths under the ground. A ghostly green glow followed them, a fey light that danced in the graceful rhythm with the dark. So she caught glimpses near the entrance of crumbling statues and sacrificial bones, the rust of old blood, artifacts of short-sighted human fear thrown into the chasm to appease imagined gods, then layers of mortal time captured and frozen in the earth, later flashes of quartz palaces, sparkles of jewels glittering in the vast vaults overhead, the fossilized stars of the underworld. I thought it was always dark here. What is that light traveling with us? She asked. You, he answered. Me? A peculiar thrill tingled through her, a joyful terror she had never experienced before. Look behind us. So she looked, and then she saw, her light mirrored against thousands upon thousands of shades, an infinity of ghosts illuminated now in her wake, lost souls found in the glow from her wings, a light too subtle for the garish overworld, but wonderfully made for the shadowy underworld. She sensed Hades' gaze upon her, 2 stars burning far off in the moonless night always surrounding him. He spoke. You are the moon to my night. Your light never fights the dark, never banishes the night. No, your light dances with the shadow and creates a strange beauty only the dead and the wise can see. Will you stay with me for a while and be my bride, the Moth Queen of the underworld? At his words, the last ashes of her false life above ground, the butterfly chrysalis she had never fit, dissolved around her, and she knew clearly for the first time who she truly was. In the infinity that followed, Persephone flew through the underworld, her wings 2 lamps guiding the dead. She traveled to the overworld every spring, carrying her maiden's heart and her crone's wisdom with her. She visited her mother and helped plant the spring and tend the summer, dancing every night around the bonfire as a Luna Moth, Luna Mother. She restored balance to the mortal realm between light and dark, life and death. For in the fall, the season of the dying, she returned under the earth, leaving a clear path for lost souls, her children, to follow, her ghost-green wings glowing in the shadows as she embraces her true animus, embraces her endless night's bliss, embraces her Hades, and mates with eternity. Karen Nilsen, copyright 2020.